Welcome back, everybody. This is Tom with Charlie's Props. Today we're going to talk about repairing pixel strips. Now I know that they've got a little bit out of favor because seeds are becoming much more popular. We have a little bit of strips still in our show, one of our house outlines, and then we have some PEX arches that include some pixel strips. If they go bad, they might get standard bullet pixels or some of our easy push pixels, but for now, we do have quite a bit of pixel strips still in our house, which are used for accent lightings, like under the cabinets. That's exactly what is going on here. We also have it around our mantle. Now, I've come up with some solutions over the years on how to replace or repair these. I'm going to talk about a very quick repair that you can make because I'm going to end up replacing this entire strip, and I'll explain why. But the repair method is you can find something sturdy or less sturdy. In the past, I've used things like bolt cutters. This is just a piece of 1/2-inch EMT, and we'll get a little more into the logistics. But what you do basically is you take the two pieces that you want to solder together. So when we're looking at this, what you want to do is you want to remove the weatherproof seal from over top of the strip, cut it back a little bit, and then when you zip tie these to whatever your support structure is, you zip tie them and you can move them back and forth to get them where you want, and then you can solder and bridge over these solder points here. It helps make it really, really easy, and then when you're done, you just cut the zip ties off and throw them away. I'm going to move these off to the side because I'm not going to be doing that kind of repair. Now the tools that I recommend you have for this is you need to have some way to solder things. I've talked about this in another video. The soldering iron is great. I don't really like it so much because it takes a long time to heat even a small point up. Even if you have a really fine point with a really high temperature, it can still take longer than it should. I recommend having diagonal cutters, scissors. I use a soldering gun. It's sort of like using a sledgehammer to put in a small finishing nail. However, even in fine work, like relatively fine work like this comparatively, it allows a real quick heat up of the area where you can get solder in, get out real quick. With this, that's really handy because you don't have to have overly steady hands, and you can get the solder where you need quickly without it getting all over the place or damaging the strip itself. You'll need some solder, a glue gun, scissors. Now you can use these helping hands as well. They're great for some projects. I find that for strips, the problem is when you're trying to get them close to one another, they hold, they leave marks in the weatherproofing, and then you end up with the center that is unsupported. That's why I came up with this method of using the bar to hold them together in place. You can move them around, and then you can just bridge your solder between them and be done. Okay, so early in the video I showed what is going on with this specific set of strips under our cabinets. We've got one pixel here that I've marked that is bad. I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to repair this pixel, which usually means, okay, find the section that is, it's a little bit easier to do one repair and just replace a whole series of pixels. Sometimes I'll replace the entire strip. With a strip this long, I wouldn't normally replace the entire thing. However, I went through, looked at my spares, and I had a roll that was almost the exact length that I needed. So that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to go with. So to start off, I'm going to line these up so that I know exactly how much length I need here. And then I'm going to take a pair of diagonal cutters or scissors. In this instance, I'm going to take scissors, and I'm going to cut right along the line. I'm going to cut right along the line, maybe a little bit advanced of the line from the side that I want to solder so that I have a little bit more room to solder in. When I cut those off, I don't need this extra anymore. So now I've got this set of pixel strips. And then the other thing I'm doing on this one is I'm going to be removing these ends that are already on here. I have enough room with the install currently that I can just cut these off and they'll still fit with where the wiring is on the cabinets themselves. It looks like I'm lined up in the same direction. The arrows are pointing in the same direction. Now the way that you remove the weather stripping is actually very simple. And real quick, what's a little bit different about these pixels than your standard bullet pixels or your standard 2812 or 2811 pixels is these are SK6812, and what it is although it still has 3 wires, what this has with the SK6812 is it's got actually a 4th pixel. So we've got your standard red, green, blue, and then the white pixel actually helps you create a more balanced white. Now we really like the SK6812s for under cabinet lighting because it allows you to control that white a lot better. Okay, so to remove the weather stripping from the back of this pixel, you simply pick with your fingernail right at the end there, and you can pull it back. I wouldn't pull it back too far. You want more than enough where the end is exposed there. And then you use your diagonal cutters, get only the weatherproofing, and then cut it off. And put that off to the side or throw it in the trash. And we're going to do the exact same thing here. We're just going to peel this back. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. Take a little bit of care not to pull up on the component or the backboard, whether you this backer is actually the circuit board itself that runs those power and data and negative lines through the channel itself. Okay, so now I'm going to pull this back a little bit here. I'm actually going to cut this way back here so I can have as much of this as I can. I guess I forgot another tool we're going to need, which is wire strippers. Now you can use some basic wire strippers, and you can go the old school way of using your teeth. I don't recommend that at all. I like these. They're automatic, and I'm going to tell you the crimpers in these are pretty darn terrible. The other thing you can use is we've got these pliers on our website. They do have strippers in them. I use these because they're more like a combination cutter and set of pliers. I really like these. I've heard a lot of really good reviews about these from people. So if you want a good set of sort of multi-use pliers, we've got them on our website. The reason I like these is they're really, really easy to use. I'm just going to strip back just a small amount. I'm probably going to do 1/4 of an inch, maybe. That's about where we're at there. Now, I actually am going to use the helping hands here because it does help a little bit. Not always, but they can be useful for some things. In this case, they are going to be helpful. You can also notice that I've put on some electrical tape here. That's to help protect whatever it is that it is clamping. Okay, I'm going to put this over here so that it doesn't drip onto the Coro. So I like to pre-solder my wires. I like to pre-solder the ends. And the reason I do that is, I know in another video I talked about you wanting the solder to flow. Well, what's really difficult, whether you're doing end to end, now that's doing it with these here, it's actually pretty easy to get the solder to flow, but I still do tend to pre-solder when I do these. But I pre-solder because you can still get the solder to flow from the wire into the contact with them pre-soldered. But it's a lot harder to hold the end of the wire against the contact itself and then get a good solder joint in it. Okay, so I'm going to pre-solder these here. You don't need a huge amount of solder here, but what you do need is enough solder that it can flow from the wire to the pixel strip itself, and it's a pretty good practice to do that. Okay, so that's going to be at this end. I'm trying to keep track of which wire goes where. Now I'm going to pre-solder this. It helps if the pixel is lying flat. It also helps to have something weigh it down. It could be your wire strippers. It could be your helping hands if you want. Whatever it is that helps, just kind of hold it down. I'm going to see if these like hold it down. It just helps to keep it in place for the soldering process. There's different ways you can do this. You can have them sort of up in the air and then push down, but I like to be able to have enough pressure. You don't want to push hard, but just enough pressure to get the very corner. Now, if you're using a gun like this, you don't want to cram it down like this because you're going to bridge across all of your contacts. Use the very, very tip, the very corner tip of the iron itself, or the gun itself. And you can get different tips for these. I like these because I do anything between really small stuff. Sometimes I do really big stuff. So I just like these are a good general tip. I've gone through one or two before, but you can also manipulate it by using just the corner and get exactly where you want. And you might need to change which side you're using because it might be easier to see what you're doing as you come down the three ends there. Now, if you didn't know this already, when you look at your strips, I mentioned a little bit earlier, there is a direction for pixels. These have a little bit of an arrow on them. If you look at the pixels themselves, you can see the arrow. What this direction means is that it is flowing the data. Now the power and the negative don't really matter which side they're hooked up to. If you want to do power balancing, you actually have it hooked up at both ends, but the data does matter because this pixel then tells the next pixel which to do, and the data flows from one side to the other. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have the proper ends at the proper sides. So that's why I mentioned which side is which and which end goes where. But also on here, if you look closely, it's going to tell you which is your positive, which is your data, which is your ground. Almost always that data is going to be in the middle. Now if you have a 4-wire pixel, it's going to be a little bit different, and it's still going to tell you on the board itself. But you want to make sure that you know what order your wires are on your connector as well. Generally, they go in the same order that they are on the pixels, whether it's bullet pixels or strips or easy push pixels. They're usually in an order. These ones here are red is positive. On this one, now I'm going to show you how this can get a little confusing sometimes. This one is red is positive, green is data, white is negative. Now on this connector here, because these are from different strips, I will show that in a minute, but it shows the order is red is positive, white is data, and blue is negative. So as long as you know the order, again, the connectors are in an order. As long as you know what order the wires are, you should be good to go. Okay, so the way that I do this might be hard to do on video. The way that I do this is I offset it just a little bit, and then I come in, I hold the wire against the solder point that I want to solder to. So I'm do this, I'm burning myself, I don't normally do it this direction. And that is all it takes. That's why I like the solder gun, it's sort of like a sledgehammer into a small finishing nail. But the reality is when you're doing something like this, you want to get in, get it hot, and get out before it starts melting everything else on the board. I can touch it right where I want it, and I've got a pretty good connection there. So I'm going to go and finish the next ones. What I try to do a little bit, and I hope this camera is capturing it, is I try to offset the end wire off this side a little bit. I will and then work my way in. The center wire, I'll do my best to get it perfectly centered. And then the ground wire, the last one, or whichever direction I'm going, the last wire will be offset just a little bit. It just gives that little bit of separation between the wires because these three contacts are rather close. So now I'm going to try to get this one in. And again, I don't normally do this in front of a camera, so I'm not normally doing it this way here. So I'm struggling a little more normal. You want to make sure you don't touch this to yourself though. And then if you are using a soldering gun, an iron is different because it's always hot. Notice how I pull the trigger. And what that's doing is that's actually giving it just a few seconds for the tip to heat up. If you've been using it regularly, it's going to be warm, but it's not going to be soldering, like ready to solder warm. But notice that I'm waiting for it to heat up before I make the connection. Okay, so one more wire here. And that's it. Now this connector here is now on here and wired, and you might be thinking, what's the hot glue for? Well, if you remember, we cut off some of that weather stripping for under cabinet lightings. It's probably not important, but the part that is kind of important is notice that these are a little bit exposed here. There's some wiring that's exposed on the back side. That's okay. I probably cut them a little bit long. It's not a big deal though, because I know that I know that I'm going to hot glue them. So what I do is I encapsulate the end of the weather stripping that I just cut off, and then I encapsulate the back of this wire all with hot glue. That way nothing can get in contact that shouldn't be in contact with the wiring. Just add enough that it's fully encapsulated. Not so much that it's got big giant globs everywhere, because it could be a little bit difficult to work with. But that's it. That's all the hot glue is used for. Gonna blow it off a little bit. And that end is done. Alright, well that's about it. I'm gonna finish this side, and I'm gonna pull this strip out, put it back in, test it. Everything's gonna be great without any issues. I hope this helped you understand some soldering. It may not apply to bullet pixels or your show specifically if you don't have strips in your show, but might give you an idea to put in some under cabinet lighting, something a little more pixel related or something great. Maybe you're watching this and you have no idea what shows are. That's great. You're only here for the under cabinet lighting. But the idea here is to show you ways that you can repair these strips and do so with confidence. Alright, I decided I'm going to do a real quick show you real-time how long this actually takes, because I was explaining everything while I was doing it. I'm going to do this other side real quick. I mentioned earlier that you got to be careful of your wire colors as long as you know the order. This one is different because the white is actually the ground. Sorry, the white is actually the data, the blue is the ground. It's different than the wire colors on the end, but just knowing the order on your end is the same. So we're going to get this done. You're going to see how long it actually takes rather than me just teaching it. And this is going to be real time. And that's it. I've also tuned the AC, sorry about the noise. That's it. This is all done. That only took, it probably took longer to hot glue it than it took to solder it. So once you get used to it, repairing these strips is actually pretty dang easy. Thanks for watching.